Tom, I want to return to charter schools and their enemies in a moment, but you just turned 90 yesterday. and I have a few of my favorite Thomas Sowell quotations. I want to read a little bit of you to yourself.
Well, I'm sitting down.
All right, you're sitting down. And, just because there are so many of us to whom you have meant so much over the years. Okay, this is from The Vision of the Anointed, which is a brilliant book. To those who are aware of it, they think of it as a classic, and I wish more people were aware of it. It is a classic. Quote, "The vision of the anointed," you're talking about elites in society, "is one in which ills such as poverty, irresponsible sex, and crime derive primarily from society rather than from individual choices and behavior. To believe in personal responsibility would be to destroy the whole special role of the anointed, whose vision casts them as in the role of rescuers of people treated unfairly by society." Close quote. All right. How did it come to be that in your lifetime, actually substantially even in my lifetime, the anointed ended up running so much of the show? Major universities, the mainstream media. Even now we see in the way corporations are responding to the politics of the moment, even corporation after corporation after corporation. Ben & Jerry's makes ice cream. And Ben & Jerry's sold that company to Unilever, which is a gigantic corporation. And yet a couple of weeks ago, Ben & Jerry's took it upon itself to release a statement about systematic racism in America dating from 1619. How making Rocky Road makes them feel as though they're entitled to make such a statement, I do not know, but maybe you do. How did this happen? How did the anointed end up on top in so many places?
I think they were in strategic places to begin with, namely the educational system. And when you and one of the other differences between the charters and the others is that the charter schools are very strong on the basics. The public schools have all kinds of indoctrination courses on which they waste these children's time. Whether what they say is good, is correct or incorrect in one way or another really does not justify the enormous waste of time of kids who desperately need to master mathematics, the English language, and a couple of other basics with which they can go out into the world and compete with anybody. But instead, their time is frittered away on these self-indulgences in the school system.
Tom Sowell on diversity, quote, "If there is any place in the Guinness Book of World Records for words repeated the most often over the most years without one speck of evidence, diversity should be a prime candidate. Is diversity our strength or anybody's strength anywhere in the world? It has not been our diversity, but our ability to overcome the problems inherent in diversity and to act together as Americans that has been our strength."
Yes.
Again, how did diversity come to be this kind of totem in society to which we must all...
Oh, it's applying the propaganda principles of Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who said that, people will believe any lie if it's big enough and told often enough and loud enough. And this lie has been told. If you look at, diversity is really another name of what used to be called balkanization. And they had to get rid of that because if you looked at the Balkans, you would see that the horrors that have gone on there have outstripped anything that has ever happened in the United States. Back in the 1970s, when I was running a research project in Washington on American ethnic groups, a Yugoslav scholar came by to visit me, and he said, "You think blacks and whites in America have a problem? The problems of blacks and whites in America is nothing compared to the problems of Serbs and Croats in Yugoslavia. And if you read the horrors that have occurred there, I'll just mention one: throwing people's babies in the air and catching them on bayonets and forcing the parents to watch it while it happens. I mean, we have not reached that point yet, even though we are headed in that direction. Diversity is not their strength. The ability to deal with the problems of diversity, that is our strength.
All right.
Or was.
Tom Sowell on government assistance, quote, "Do people who advocate special government programs for blacks realize that the federal government has had special programs for American Indians, including affirmative action, since the early 19th century, and that American Indians remain one of the few groups worse off than blacks?" Close quote.
Yes.
So the point there is, do not look to government action or to politics to solve anybody's problem.
The point is that if you think that the government action is the answer, at least look at the facts and test your belief against facts, rather than just keep repeating words that are popular.
All right. By the way, the California legislature, I don't know whether, I can't sort out whether it's actual legislation or it was a resolution, non-binding resolution. In any event, something moved in the California legislature calling for formal reparations to African Americans. How do you respond to that?
One, I know and they know it's not going to happen. So what we're looking at is someone who wants votes or followers, and that this will get them votes or get them followers and finances. But it's not, all it will do is simply tear the country apart.
All right. Back to charter schools and their enemies. Once again, I want to repeat that central finding. Charter schools located in low-income Black and Hispanic neighborhoods have achieved educational results not only far above the levels achieved by most public schools in those neighborhoods, but sometimes even higher educational results than those in most schools located in affluent white neighborhoods, close quote. Tom, at a moment when the country is tearing itself apart over questions of race and inequality, over all of it, Tom Sowell steps forward and says, wait a moment, there's a way out. And it's not a particularly surprising way out. Good schools. Give Black kids and Hispanic kids good schools. They'll be fine. And we know they'll be fine because that's what the data shows.
Yeah.
It is as if we were all in a burning house and Tom Sowell said, everybody, there's an open door. Let's just walk through. Let's just walk through. And I don't know if I look at this and I think to myself, Tom is able to remain calm about this, but it is beyond infuriating. It's a kind of madness. It's as if there's an open door in a burning house and Bill de Blasio is trying to keep it shut.
Yes. Oh, I'm not always this calm. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent the time that I spent that. I have invested more in this book than in any other book that I've written, because I realize just how big the stakes are. That there are kids for whom education is their one big opportunity for a much better life, and there are people out there stopping them from getting it because it would interfere with the prerequisites of the adults in the system.
Last question. I'd like to close, if I may, in a moment by asking you to read the closing passage from the book. But two things happened yesterday. One was that you turned 90, and the other was that Charter Schools and Their Enemies was published. Yeah. And by the way, it's not as if you just awoke after a long retirement slumber. I've added it up. You've written a new book or re-edited, produced a new edition of a book about every 18 months since turning 80. Yeah. And Tom, I don't know, I have news for you. You haven't had anything to prove to anybody in a quarter of a century at least.
Yeah.
What keeps Tom Sowell, 90 plus 1 day old, going? Why do you're not just going, you're fighting. Let's face it.
Yes.
This book is a polemic. You want action to follow from this book.
I am hoping it's desperately needed. And there are people who are organized to try to make sure that these kids do not escape the traditional public school and cost them money, union dues, and teachers' jobs in the traditional schools. If the charter schools get going and all these kids get off the waiting list, they're going to have to change the entire way of life in the traditional public schools, and it will not be pretty.
It won't be pretty. It'll be pretty for the kids.
Yes.
Yeah. Tom, would you read the closing passage from Charter Schools and Their Enemies?
This is especially important when considering children from a cultural background lacking the advantages that are common among children born into more fortunate circumstances. Children who have not received at home the educational, behavioral, and other foundations for making the most of their natural ability must get those things in school. These are the plain and harsh realities of circumstances. The stakes are huge, not only for children whose education can be their one clear ticket for a better life, but also for a whole society that needs more productive members, fulfilling themselves while contributing their talents to the progress of the community at large. Children who emerge from their education with a mastery of mathematics, the English language, and other fundamentals are ready to be those kinds of people, regardless of what color or class they come from. No narrow vested interests of adults, whether financial, political, or ideological, should be allowed to block that.
Dr. Thomas Sowell, author of Charter Schools and Their Enemies. Thomas Sowell, age 90 and still swinging. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
And happy birthday again, Tom. And Tom, will you do me a favor?
Yes.
Take the afternoon off, will you please?
I wish I could.
For Uncommon Knowledge, the Hoover Institution, and Fox Nation, I'm Peter Robinson.